Good evening. Welcome to the Township Board meeting for February 27th. And we welcome everyone tonight. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. Also, I'd like Mr. Mansour, would you lead us in the pledge?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to ask for approval of our consent agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And now for approval of our regular agenda.
So move.
Okay.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we're going to move to privilege presentation, and I'd like to ask our Chief of Police, Chief Wiles, to come to the podium.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As we're aware, we've been trying for a long time to fill open positions over at the police department. And it hasn't been for a lack of effort that we haven't been able to fill these positions. But we gotta find the right people. The future of our department depends on the people that we bring in now at the ground level and are gonna develop and grow with our department. I'm happy to report that recently we've had opportunity to do some interviews, and we have found two candidates that very much so rose to the top and are gonna be great additions to our department. We have them here today. I'd like to introduce you to them. Officer William Wheat, if you could please step forward here, please. And Officer Josh Morgan, if you could please come up. So a little bit about the two new officers. Officer William Wheat, he's a Grand Blanc guy.
Can you use the microphone, Chief? Thank you.
Officer Wheat is he's a Grand Blanc guy, Grand Blanc High School, and then went off to Wayne State University, where he was an officer with Wayne State University for a little bit before he decided to come back, and we're so glad that he's part of the community, knows the community, and he's going to be a great addition to our police department and serving the residents of the township. Josh Morgan, he's from Clio, so a Genesee County guy, knows about the area and the agency, spent the last 5 years roughly with the Genesee County Sheriff's Department. Got to see several aspects of that Sheriff's Department, whether it's working in the jail, on the road, and we are glad that they are here. Like I said, they rose to the top. They separated themselves from all the other candidates that we interviewed, and there was a lot of candidates. So we're very happy to report that they are here with us. They're going to be great additions and get started in the field training program so we can get them on the road and serving the residents of the township. So gentlemen, thank you very much. Clerk Lane, could you please come and we can swear these gentlemen in.
Shall we do it separately with the oldest member of your department between the two? We know what that is. All right. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Michigan, the laws of the Charter Township of Grand Blanc, and serve as a police officer in our department to the best of your ability?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Okay. You, Officer Morgan, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Michigan, the laws of the Charter Township of Grand Blanc, and serve in our department to the best of your ability? Yes, I do. Congratulations. If you've got a pen. If you want to, you can.
If I could have Officer Wheat's mom, Glenn, come up, please. And Officer Morgan's wife, Alicia, please come up. Then ask by these fine men to pin their badges on.
couple of badges here that maybe you want to give out as well. To a couple of our younger.
To our future
I see some
patrol
future officers out there. We are always recruiting.
Well, there goes our MERS payment this month.
We'll take a few minutes, and if you want to gather for pictures, what have you, you're welcome to stick around. We have our Drain Commissioner Jeff Wright going to give a presentation next on our new water system, and you're welcome to stick around for that. Or if you want to gather in the back with your new officers, we can understand that as well.
Oh, excellent.
So, thank you. We're going to keep working.
Mr. Chair.
That's all right.
You have your book still up there.
Jeff, did you want to go up there too? I was going to go up there.
Go for it. I mean, I got all night. It's up to you guys.
What do you guys prefer? No. Okay, let's keep going.
Let's go.
Yep, let's go.
Let's go.
With that, I've got the presentation. I don't know if you have a remote for it. No? I'll be glad to change your slide. You just tell me when.
Okay.
Let me bring it up.
What kind of signal do you want?
Yeah.
Change it, change it.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a lot of signals.
Okay.
Okay, I was gonna give.
Unless you want me to set my laptop over there and you can change it. Does he know where to change it?
Does it have to be plugged in?
Just to this, so we can move it over there. You want to change it? Yeah, it'll reach over there. Let me bring it over there.
It's on, Jeff.
How do you feel? Are you better? We can jump rope. What do you call that? Triple.
Which one's this? Oh, you're looking at the Dutch thing. That was just. I'm like, I didn't see this one.
Oh, they can't get in. It's locked.
Yeah. So much for the Open Meetings Act.
It's an,
Okay. Alrighty.
You want to lock that just in case? Maybe I should, huh? Just in case they want to come back?
well, I think
Sure.
if you open the door, that's the noise
Whenever
that'll come in.
I'll be talking right into it.
What's that?
Microphone. Can you hear me without?
Yep,
talking?
she'll turn it down if it's too much
Okay.
noise, so. Okay, we welcome you, Drain Commissioner Wright, and we're looking forward to your presentation, so.
Well, thank you for having me. The last time I was here, I said this would be the first township that I came back to, actually, to give this presentation, and you are. I'd also apologize for, I think it was 2 weeks ago, when the bug hit me. Couldn't make it, so I apologize for that. I've got a couple things I'm going to go over with tonight very quickly. I want to start with where we all started. As you all know, we've been on a water system since the 60s that's pretty much controlled our water future. We got together with several other communities back in 2012 to determine that it's in our best interest to build and operate and maintain our own water system. And we created the Carrignandi Water Authority. This first picture was the very first piece of equipment that went out on that job site in 2014. It's basically a giant drill bit that tunneled underneath Lake Huron for 1.5 miles to put the intake pipe in. To get that pipe in, we got the first permit from the state of Michigan under the Great Lakes Water Compact that allows Genesee County and its other partners to take up to 85 million gallons a day out of Lake Huron. This is the lake pumping station. Of course, it's been completed now. The pipe that went out underneath the lake brings the water into this particular pumping station, and it pumps it all the way to Genesee County. You see the high wires there, that all had to be brought in by DTE. I have to give them kudos because they brought power to an area that didn't have the supply. Typically, a project of this magnitude would have taken them 5 to 6 years to get the power to us. They got it to us in 3 years, so I got to give them some kudos. This is our intermediate pumping station near Brown City. It's the top of the hill, so to speak. The pumping station at the lake pumps up 120 feet over about a 25-mile distance to this particular station. And then the water's pumped from this station into Genesee County. And this is the treatment plant that Genesee County completed last year. You can see the reservoir behind it, which holds a 14-day water supply. The treatment plant itself, the reservoir, and all of the surrounding facilities was approximately $100 million. A lot of local people worked on all of these facilities. As a matter of fact, almost 2,000 people total worked on this project in one form or another, whether it was the building trades, the engineers, the surveyors, the elected officials that voted on many aspects of this from multiple communities. Close to 2,000 people made this happen. These are some of the pumps being installed in that treatment plant. Of course, it's all been done now, but I thought it'd be interesting for you to see some of the sizing on this stuff. Some of the piping in the plant. It's nice to have a brand new, beautiful plant too, I gotta tell you. It's staffed by 16 employees. Between the 16 employees, they have close to 400 years of experience between all of them. We have 3 F1 licensed operators, which are the most important part of any treatment plant. We have our own lab, state-of-the-art, that tests for everything you can imagine at this facility. We not only test here, but we have an existing lab at our Montrose wastewater treatment plant. So we do split samples, where we take samples on a daily or every 12-hour basis, send them to 2 different facilities, have them tested by 2 different crews. Split sample, in my opinion, is the best way to go. And we also have a blind sample that we send to the DEQ once a month for them to test also. And we've been on the system for almost 4 months now, and the sampling's been excellent. More of the lab shots, more of the internal systems. And I can't help but bring up the fact all this pipe's in the ground, but all this pipe was made in Flint, Michigan. The close to 86 miles of pipeline that were put in totally for this project was made by American Cast Iron, a pipe company formerly, well, they're located in several other states. This is their first facility in Michigan, and they're up at the old Buick City site. They were the first new manufacturing facility to Buick City site in over 38 years. It's about a $22 million investment that they put into that facility, the building alone. And some of the crews installing the pipe, as you can see, it's 7, 8, 9 feet in the ground. They weld every one of those joints, imagine that. A welded joint every 40 feet for 80 miles. There were a lot of welds. So the Carrignandi pipeline was under budget. It was estimated to cost $300 million. It came in at $292 million. It was completed on June 9th, as it states. It was under budget and on time. Some of the pluses for us, it's the end of the double-digit rate increases that we were receiving for the last 15 years straight. Our children and our grandchildren will have the lowest water rates in the state, if not the whole Great Lakes region. The majority of the cost of our water at this point is the debt service for this pipeline. When the debt service is paid off, and I hope some of us are still here, if not, we should chisel this in stone someplace. In 27 years, the debt service will be paid off. And at that point in time, you can reduce water costs to whoever's on the system by 75%. We will be far below any other community. Another thing that Carrignandi brings is two types of water. Treated at a lower price than what we were getting it for, and untreated or raw water of very high quality that can be used for high-end water customers, which I'm going to go to in a little later in the presentation. And most importantly, we'll control our own future. We, elected officials, will control our own system. If we mess up, people can say goodbye to us. Before, you didn't even know who to call. The water treatment plant was on budget and on time. Unfortunately, I couldn't say under budget, but it was on budget. It was estimated at $72 million. It came in at $72 million. Spence Brothers out of Saginaw built it. They used exclusively local contractors, suppliers. All the cement came from Modern, and there are tens of thousands of yards of cement in that facility. So they, all in all, there's about $90 million in payroll between these two projects that were put into Flint and Genesee County because of the workforce and the way the contracts were structured. Now, you've been hearing a lot about, this is, I'm switching gears from what we've done to the latest, which is what's been referred to as the grand bargain. It was between Flint, Genesee County, the Great Lakes Water Authority, formerly the Detroit system, and the Carrignandi Water Authority. I was asked to come to the governor's office about a year and a half ago. I sit down with him, representatives from Flint, including the Mayor Weaver, representatives from the DEQ, from the Great Lakes Water Authority, etc. And at that meeting, the representatives from Flint and the Great Lakes Water Authority expressed a desire for Flint to stay on the older system, the Great Lakes Water Authority. My comment to them was, we will do everything we can to help you as long as Genesee County and its customers and the Carrignandi are not negatively affected. So what has come about has been coined the grand bargain by a gentleman by the name of Richard Baird from the state of Michigan. So I have some of the highlights of that. One of the things that we've already built into our system is, with that reservoir that I showed you earlier, is our own emergency backup water supply. But part of the grand bargain, we also have a third possibility now. We can switch back over to the Detroit system if our backup water supply wasn't working or our treatment plant were shut down. Most importantly to us, and this is where new revenue comes to Genesee County and its customers, is for years, one of the problems that Flint and Genesee County had with the Detroit system is if there was an emergency, there's one pipeline serving 2 million people. Flint and Genesee County were the first ones cut off from that pipeline and the last ones to get turned back on. It was one of the reasons we pursued the pipeline in the first place. It wasn't just a cost factor. I remind you that aren't too young that in 2003 there was a power outage that left us all without water for almost 3 days in August of 2003. That was the catalyst for me to look. The power outage was all of Northeast United States. At that point in time, we had just gotten done paying for $10 million worth of backup generators for the Detroit system. When the power outage hit, they couldn't find the generators. And between the pricing and the fact that they did cut us off from waters, when we start exploring our options of, can we do this or not? We have to not only do it for a cost reason, but for public health and safety. If you're out of water, you're in big trouble. So we actually sat down with Detroit for 2 years. We came close to an agreement of building this pipeline together. And at the last moment, Victor Mercado, one of the directors, came out publicly and stated that Detroit was just going to build the second pipeline. The deal with that was, though, we could build our own, we knew, for about $300 million. The Detroit pipeline was $820 million. of which we would have paid close to 35% of the cost over a period of time. This, in the black, you say Genesee County provides backup water supply to Flint, Lapeer, Imlay, and Mayville. This is new for us. It proves out the fact that a second pipeline truly needed to be built, because after the Flint water crisis, the EPA and DEQ went to Detroit/Great Lakes Water Authority and said, if you're going to supply all these people with water, these communities with a 60-year-old pipeline, you have to also supply a backup emergency supply. The cost to them would, at that point in time, was about $300 million. They came to us as part of the grand bargain and said, will you be our emergency backup water supply? So we are now the emergency backup water supply by contract for the next 30 years. First year, $700,000 with escalators in the potential in the contract for every year for the next 30 years. That's whether they use the water or not. Another point worth bringing up is the fact that we felt that the last few years that we were on the Detroit system, they were overcharging us. And as part of the grand bargain, when we sit down with them, we said, let's get it all resolved. We were going to sue you for these overcharges. Let's work this out also. To that end, they paid us back $5.2 million in 2016 for overcharges from 2015, 2014. So we got that resolved as part of the grand bargain. We had to build a 48-inch pipeline that was part of our original project. But when Flint decided to initially come with KWA, they no longer needed their 72-inch pipeline that was supplying Flint and Genesee County. So they came to us and said, we'd like you to sell you this 72, put money in your coffers, reduce your capital costs. And we said, great. We paid them approximately $4 million for that 72-inch pipeline. Because they decided to stay with the Great Lakes Water Authority, we had to go back to our original plan and build this 48-inch connector pipe that wasn't part of the final contract. And to that end, the state of Michigan paid us $7.9 million cash towards the $18 million project. That $18 million project would have been part of our original project if we hadn't bought the 72 from Flint. So we're back to square one, really. We've built the pipeline. And fortunately, the state kicked in $7.9 million to that end. Flint gets the 72-inch pipeline back. We also tried to assist Flint and the state in connecting their plant to the raw water supply, which was a big holdup for Flint. And we spent about $300,000 in engineering to do that, to expedite the project. When Flint decided to stay with the Great Lakes, there also was decided that the Great Lakes Water Authority would reimburse us the $300,000. Now they have the plans. And if they ever decide to hook up an additional water system to that plant, they have the plans to do it and they would pay for it. Probably the most important thing for all of us too is that Flint was on the bond sale for this pipeline to the tune of about $6.9 million annually for 28 years. As part of the grand bargain, now all of the water dollars collected in Flint will go into an independent trust. And that independent trust will distribute the dollars first to KWA to pay the bond debt, second to the Great Lakes Water Authority to pay for the water that they purchase, and the remainder will go back to the city of Flint. This has actually made the investors quite happy that there's an independent trust that's overseeing all of the dollars. To that end, I believe we're doing a refi in a couple of weeks on $76 million of the KWA. And I believe that that trust agreement that all parties agreed to and voted on will reduce the percentage, and this is my own personal estimate, from about 4.7% to about 3.9 to 4% on the interest rate. And as you all know, a percentage point or even 0.1% on $75 million over a 30-year period is a lot of money. So because of that trust agreement, I believe we're going to get a really, really good interest rate. Some of the possibilities, I said, with the raw water, this is very high quality water. I'll give you the example where the little red robots are. That's the largest greenhouse in the state of Michigan currently. It grows tomatoes year-round for Myers Thrifty Acres. They go through a lot of water. They don't want treated water. They want the raw water. What the raw water does, ladies and gentlemen, is a business comes in and says they need, for agribusiness particularly, they need 10,000 gallons a day. Well, they have to pay treated water price for that 10,000 gallons, which might be $100. Then they have to pay to remove the chlorine and the fluoride before they use it, which adds even more money. We can sell them untreated, high-quality water that they don't have to remove anything from for 10 cents on the dollar of what they can buy treated water for. I believe it opens up tremendous economic potential for our area. Green technologies, agribusiness particularly, when you consider that over 80% of our bean crop, for instance, is shipped by train to Canada or South Texas, where it's processed, packaged, and shipped back to us. I can say that about a lot of different agricultural products that we produce in the state. I believe that this will give us an edge up, a leg up on any agricultural, agro-business industries, and they do use a lot of water, and they want the raw water. To that end, there have been many interested businesses in the last several months that have inquired about this, inquired about properties, etc. And it is only a matter of time before we get a few of them. Whether it's, you know, the actual manufacturing or processing of the food, or the technicians that make those machines that you see in that picture, or the ones that operate those machines or maintain those machines, those are all high potential for all of us. And that's it. Questions? Yes.
Slane? Oh, I'm sorry. Good, Aaron.
Either way.
Ms. Conn?
I don't care. To Mr. Wright, couple things. I'm glad to hear the debt service from the trust for City of Flint. Now, that's the first I've heard that. So I don't think that's something that's been publicized very well, and I think it's a good thing for the other customers of the Carroll Gandhi. You know what I mean? When we thought Flint leaving was they were getting out of this thing, and then the cost of the pipe that we bought for $4 million. But so I'm glad to see that. I think that's huge. That's quite a negotiated deal right there. So if I understand that correctly, the debt service of Flint's portion of that pipe of the whole project is going to continually being paid out of the Flint water customers, correct?
Yes.
What a deal. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that. The second thing was, how in the case of you piping the raw water, okay, I can get that you got the raw water coming into the treatment facility, right? How do you then propose to get that water out to the customers that
Well,
want?
there's an existing 36-inch raw water pipeline that leaves our treatment plant, comes all the way into the city of Flint currently.
Okay,
And you would have to connect to that pipeline to bring it down to Grand Blanc or to other areas.
okay, so more construction would be
More
required to get,
construction
okay.
would be
The
required.
Meyer on Center Road, for example, somehow they would have to get that.
Yeah, I don't believe Myers store would want the raw.
Oh,
water.
okay, so this is like,
You're probably looking at the green.
I see, okay, I'm sorry.
One of the
Yeah,
reasons
that's,
we
I was
wanted-
picturing
That's
something
okay.
different.
One of the reasons we took the water, raw water, to where we did was, number one, to utilize Flint's plant, which they had put $50 million into in previous years.
Mhm.
And at least at the time, they referred to it as a state-of-the-art facility. But the main reason was Buick City. We wanted that raw water available to Buick City, so it could be redeveloped into agribusiness, etc. There are still plenty of greenfield sites that are between that point and back to that plant. And there's a real potential to run what I would refer to as lateral lines off of that 36-inch north and south into Burton, Grand Blanc,
Okay.
Genesee, Mount Morris, etc.
Okay.
But that would take additional work. Yes.
Last question, kind of maybe through to Jeff as well as Fire Chief. Our water for our hydrants throughout Genesee County, our fire hydrants, that's the same water that we tap for our drinking water, right? Or are they separate lines? That's too bad, because I was gonna say, that'd be a great deal for untreated water, right?
In California, they actually use gray water for that. You want to, basically what you have to do though is parallel every line.
Yeah, in South Carolina, it's law, they cannot have their
When you're
drinking
building
water.
new, it's a little easier than when you come in after the fact, so you
Yeah.
want to put a second
Yeah.
line in.
Yeah,
Because you've got all the utilities there already, the
Yeah.
roads, the gas, the electric, etc. But there are areas that do that.
I know in South Carolina, they require them in any new, line installation, they cannot have the drinking water and the firefighting water on the same line, so that's interesting. I didn't know how we were doing that here. I was quite sure it was the same line, but, yeah.
It's a heck of a public service project, huh?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Lane, you had your hand up first. and
Yes, Mr. Supervisor. My question was related to what Mr. Kent asked you, and that was, with the untreated water, what would be the area within Genesee County or between Lake Huron? How big an area are we opening up for ag business?
That's a very good question. And it's based on the original permit we got from the state of Michigan, the Great Lakes Water Compact. Under the Granholm administration, which this project was approved under, some think it was the Snyder administration, but it was actually the Granholm administration. You had to designate a service area to get the permit. Our designated service area for this pipeline is Sanilac County, St. Clair County, Lapeer County, Genesee County, the eastern half of Shiawassee County, the northern half of Livingston County, the northern half of Oakland and Macomb County, if it ever came to that. There's a total of 600,000 people that live in that service area. One of the reasons we like, Sanilac County is the largest agricultural county in the state of Michigan. Lapeer's County is no slouch. Most people don't realize that Genesee County has 178,000 acres in agriculture. Again, the majority of that raw food product is shipped across the lake to Canada. We're glad to partner with those communities. Our hope and goal was that these agricultural communities would ship their bulk agro product to the Buick City site, process it, package it, and distribute it from there. They can still do that, but it has to be done through Flint and the Great Lakes Water Authority, not through the KWA. And there are also, as I said, many green areas that could be developed in Genesee County and in those other counties. Where those other counties are lacking, though, where we still have the leg up, so to speak. Food processing creates a very strong wastewater stream. Genesee County has two wastewater treatment plants that's capable and has excess capacity to treat that wastewater. Sanilac County does not, neither does Lapeer. So we have both ends of the spectrum. We have the two types of water, and we have the ability to treat that water after the agribusiness customer or the green technology customer has used it, something other communities don't have. We are also, there's the possibility that there's going to be a pipeline. I can't talk about it because of the confidentiality, but there may be a raw water pipeline coming closer to Grand Blanc than you might think at this point in time that might open up the whole southern tier of the county with raw water if it is accomplished. I do believe this raw water, particularly at 10 cents on the dollar, is going to encourage at least people to come in and take a look at it. And I do believe at some point in time, they're gonna start buying it.
Mr. Massey?
Yes, Mr. Wright, I have 3 questions.
Sure.
Matter of fact, I have 4 since you
Only
raised
three?
the issue about the,
No, you
confidentiality
you
of
want, Joe.
the possible new pipeline, raw water. But the first 2 questions, the first question you showed, you know, in your video, you had a drill bit.
Giant.
Yes, how many times did you change inserts? Did you have a problem drilling, to your knowledge?
That was one of the smoothest operations going. That was the largest barge, by the way, on the Great Lakes. And that's just the end of the whole system. There's an 84-inch, that's 84 inches in diameter. About this big. And there was an 84-inch pipe that goes all the way back to that shoreline that through hydraulics pushed that drill bit out through the lake bottom, about 12 feet below the surface of the bottom of the lake. No problems whatsoever. And I was worried about that. These types of tunneling operations are dangerous. The last time one like this was attempted, 22 people unfortunately passed away drilling under Lake Huron. There were no injuries. The people that did it knew exactly what they're doing, and technology is much better today than it was then also. A little side note, if I had my druthers today, they have divers that go down and service that and do different things. Most of them are men and women or former Navy SEALs, etc. And they get paid $600 an hour, whether they're sitting on the barge or under the water, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Is that why you didn't hire me?
Pardon?
Is that why you didn't hire me?
No, because I knew you and I couldn't do it. I hired myself.
My second question, Mr. Wright, is the plant that manufactures the
Yes.
pipes.
Yeah.
What future plan do you have for the plant?
Well, that plant, it's not our plant. It's a private company that we bid this pipe. There were 3 different national pipe companies that bid on the pipe for this project. American Cast Iron was the lowest bid. They were formerly and still are located in South Carolina and Alabama and Kansas. The shipping costs to get that pipe from those facilities to here was $12 million. They wanted a present in the northern tier of the country, not just the southern tier. They decided to make their $20 million investment. They saved $12 million in shipping, plus it allowed them to be the low bid. They are still manufacturing pipe, but not for us. They get bid. In fact, they're going to, I believe, expand their facility to start making parts for hydro dams at that facility also, what they call gate stocks, I think. I'm not really up on hydro.
Yeah.
Canada's really expanding its hydro capabilities. And being in Michigan, they'll be very competitive to supply some of those very large pieces that go in those hydro systems, some of the big piping that goes there. But I think they're here, they came here because they wanted to be here. They used the bid actually to establish themselves here, but they've been making pipe for other communities, even outside of the state. They've had some small jobs up in Minnesota that they've made pipe out of this facility for, and I know they're bidding some other projects.
There's a processing plant, and I assume that it uses raw water in Bay City, and I think it's a beet processing
Very
plant.
possible.
Do you have any desire to get into that area?
Well, before we formed Carrignandi, not only did we try to work with Detroit to build this second pipeline, we actually approached Saginaw, Midland, and Bay City to form a partnership. And they didn't want anything to do with us because they felt we would be competition to them. So they already have water systems up in that area. that we really would be difficult to run a pipeline or compete with them would not be cost effective.
Thank you.
Any other questions,
Yeah,
Mr.
one more.
Massey?
No.
Oh, okay.
Mansour?
Okay, Commissioner Wright, I've got a couple questions. First, you mentioned earlier that you had split samples and samples going to the DEQ.
Yes.
Did any of those come back with any anomalies, anything outside of the ranges?
No. And the EPA and the DEQ have parameters that are, you have to have a minimum of this and a maximum of the same thing. You've got to be in those parameters. All of our samples have came in within those parameters. One thing that we are doing differently, and we're going to be changing that hopefully pretty soon, is the DEQ, to be on the safe side, has required us to put more phosphate in the water than we believe it needs. Phosphate is used for corrosion control because they want to be extra safe and err on the side of caution. They're actually making us, and it's still in the parameters, but they're actually making us put twice as much phosphate in as we would put in ourselves. We're already in the process of working with them to get that reduced because they're realizing that the corrosion issue in Genesee County is not an issue.
Second question, regarding the debt service, the 27 years piece of this. So is there some, I guess, some kind of sinking fund or some way to make sure that at the end of the time when we're 27 years into it, we've got a plant that's 27 years old and all the rest of that we're not caught having to, you know, refinance a whole pack of money again to do the maintenance upgrades?
I fully appreciate what you're talking about. Right now, as a side issue, we have 2 years of bond debt in reserve
Okay,
that we'll get back at the end.
Okay.
So we really only have 25 years of bond debt. To appreciate the idea of a sinking fund is, especially from a time when things are installed, their design life is 30, 40, 50 years. The design life of this pipeline is 100 years. The treatment plant with proper maintenance will last 100 years. You're gonna have to switch out some pumps every 25 years or so. But there is a sinking fund. I could not give you the details on it today, but I could certainly get that to you.
thank you very much.
Is that in the audited report, the sinking fund?
Should be, yes.
I actually sent a link to all of our board members for the
Thank
most
you.
recent audit. Mr. Thomas?
I just have 3 questions, well, 2 questions and a comment. I was reading an article, and the first one's a comment. It was in the Wall Street Journal, and then it was piggybacked by the New York Times, that they actually said that the KWA would never, ever, ever happen again in the state of Michigan.
I would agree with that.
That we were the first or we were the last ones who would ever be able to pull off, well, I apologize, yourself be able to pull off something of this magnitude.
2,000 of us pulled it off.
Pardon?
2,000 of us pulled it off. It wasn't just me. I actually they may have been quoting me. It was after we got the permit from the Great Lakes Water Authority, which took 9 months in itself, or excuse me, from the Great Lakes Compact. There was a huge amount of additional permits that were required for fish, for frogs, for clams, for snakes, for birds, for trees. We spent a few millions of dollars getting those permits, which were required. But the process in itself took a year or so. I also think the bigger part of this is the state has been, we were on a monopoly, okay? Everything south of us is still on that monopoly. Bay City, Saginaw, and Midland have their own water supply. You go over to the west side of the state, You've got two counties, Kent County and I can't remember the other one, pretty much control all the water distribution over there. So there may be more pipelines, but they'll be by the monopolies or the entities that already exist. I don't believe there will be any new entities created to build a pipeline like this. I also believe that unless the Trump administration really deregulates the EPA, because there's been a lot of additional permitting requirements put in since we got our permits, that I believe would also make it very difficult for anybody to put a pipeline into this magnitude. You also have to remember at the time, the Great Lakes were 4.5 feet lower than they are today, and everybody was
Right.
screaming, we're gonna drain the Great Lakes.
Right.
Noah was saying at the time, and I'm not talking about Noah in the Bible, I'm talking about the national organization, that it would take 30 years for those Great Lakes to come back. 2 years, they not only came back, but they're higher than the norm now, and people are gonna start screaming for seawalls, my docks are underwater, etc. It's a cyclic thing that happens on the Great Lakes every 30 years.
When I was, I'm sorry, I had two more. I've been with our boat, we've seen this in the construction when you were doing that in Port Huron. We keep our boat in the Black River and we would take our dinghies up and watch you guys go under the Black River. It was just fascinating watching that. But on a side note, whatever happened to the mollusks and the snails with the Black River when you had to quit building because of that?
That wasn't us. The Black River was, the Black River, even though the name makes it sound like a river, and it was
It's
to a
a
great
cut.
extent, is a county drain,
Yep.
an inter-county drain over
And
there.
it cuts to Lake Huron.
Yes. So the counties over there, all the farmers were having flooding problems. They wanted the Black River dug out. The EPA and others said, well, you've got this clam and this mollusk and this, and we don't want you digging it out. And there was a long court battle, they ended up digging it out. We had to get, I had to spend $65,000 on the Mill Creek and Black River to do a hunt for what they refer to as the riffle shell clam.
That's what it was.
The riffle shell clam, there's not been a live riffle shell clam seen in over 90 years. You can still see the shells, but no living ones. But I had to pay an individual who specializes in this to walk 25 miles up one bank, 25 miles down the other bank, to try to find a living riffle shell clam, which they did not find.
Be able to keep the bottles and cans they picked up? I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
And my last thing, and I could probably
they
direct
left the
this to
plastic
you.
ones there.
I could probably direct this to you, Mr. Supervisor, but what happened with the fluoride that you brought to our attention?
It's in the water.
It's in the water until and unless the county board votes on it.
The Board of
We are
Commissioners?
required by EPA standards to continue putting fluoride in the water. There was at least one, if not two hearings, public hearings, I can't remember. Was there two? Do you remember, Scott? I know there's at least one.
There was, there was one hearing.
So there's one hearing, and if the board takes no action, I have to continue. If the board takes action to say no, then I can stop putting the fluoride in it.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
One of the things, my hat's off to all those involved. I think, the state, the people around the state don't understand the massive, magnitude of this project, I don't think.
It was a big one.
Several years ago, I was listening to a Detroit radio program, and they were interviewing one of my friends, Brooks Patterson, and I think I related the story to you, that he was on the radio saying that he didn't want, Genesee County to leave because it would really hurt the ratepayers in Oakland and Macomb and Wayne County that are on the GLEWA or Detroit water system.
Yes.
And so anyways, having been informed of some of the rate differences between what Genesee County was paying and what, that Tri-County area was paying, being pretty significant difference. I called into the radio station and informed them that I could understand why he was upset that we would be leaving, because we've been bankrolling their system for a number of years. But
Very good point. If I may, there's two issues on that. Even today, the average water customer in Oakland and Macomb County pays $6 per 1,000 cubic feet. In Flint, and while we were still on the system, we were paying $22 off the same pipeline for that same 1,000 cubic feet. And one other way to look at it, Flint and Genesee County at the time represented 2% of their customer base. And we were paying 10% of their total budget. That's why they wanted us to stay on so bad.
with regard to the refinancing and the considerable savings, so will that reflect in the rates then that the ratepayers are paying, or how does that
Well,
work?
It'll help, as I've said all along, what I'll guarantee is we've had 14 years of double-digit rate increases. We will never have a double-digit rate increase as long as I'm here, and whoever's next shouldn't have to have one either. To give you an example, this year, to help finish paying off that 42-inch pipeline that the state only paid us a portion of, I have to raise rates approximately 75 cents on average for a residential customer per month. The rate increase you'll see from Great Lakes to its northern tier customers this year is close to $3.50. So we're already saving money from my perspective. The rate increase, it may, or the bond refi may result in $200,000 or $300,000 a year, maybe $500,000 a year in reduced bond payments. I'm not ready to say we'll reduce rates because we are in our first year. I can't speculate at this point in time. Now the Consumers Power says that within the next 5 years, they're gonna do away with all their coal plants. What does that mean to electric prices, which is my driving cost that I can't control? So at this point in time, I would say no, that I can't guarantee a rate reduction. Once we see what Consumers does with how they're gonna replace these coal-fired plants, which is still the least expensive form of energy in this state. And again, other than our bond debt, our electrical costs are the next biggest cost that we have. I run the whole KWA with 2 employees. So labor costs are nothing. It's electricity and bond debt.
I've seen these national or international, waterworks magazines or digests, and I'm wondering when we're going to get an award here in Genesee County for.
Well, we've gotten some. I should have put them on the presentation actually.
But it has to be one of the larger projects in the country.
Well, it is. There's still a lot of animosity towards the fact that we busted the Detroit monopoly. It's as simple as that. There's a lot of engineering firms, a lot of engineers, a lot of surveyors, a lot of legal counsel that made money off of that system. And they're never really going to be happy with what we did. But there have been articles, not recently, they go back about 1.5 years, 2 years. So you had to be looking a couple of years ago to see
Okay.
them.
All right. Yes, Mr. Massey?
Yes. Last question.
Yes, sir.
How did you take those overhead pictures?
I've got a guy that works for me that's 7'2", by the name of Tim Davidak. Can he let me get on his shoulders? I'm just kidding. But I do have a guy working for me that's almost 7 foot, Tim Davidak.
Oh, really?
We, about 3 years ago, invested in one of the first drones with cameras on them. And we bought it not only to take pictures like this, but we have several water towers that you're supposed to go up and inspect all the time. Somebody's got to physically climb up them. So the drone's also capable of inspecting these water towers. And we're trying to get it set up so it can fly the sewer right-of-ways to make sure all the manhole covers are on. As we all experienced this last rain event, and we have found several manhole covers that have been removed. And when you've got a manhole cover removed with water standing over it, it doesn't take much to flood that sewer system. So we bought a drone. It's actually old technology now. It's about 3 years old, but that's how we took the overheads with a drone that I think cost us about $1,200 at the time.
Ms. Lane?
Well, first of all, I want to compliment you, because for all of these years since you finally came back to your job many years ago, if it wasn't for your perseverance, many times standing by yourself and saying we're going to do it, this never would have been accomplished. So your foresight, your tenacity, but being a gentleman, and as many of us have heard tonight, you don't take these compliments as yourself, as many people do. You take the compliments and share them with the team that you built and the people that assisted you. So I compliment you for how you handle compliments and wish you well in the future.
Thank you.
I have one question. Many years ago, we put in 1999, a second Knollwood well to be used as backup if Genesee County needed backup. So since the two Knollwood wells are major entities that we own and we maintain, what, if you can, would you say would be the best direction for us to take with those two Knollwood wells? And what future they have for your system?
When you put them in, it was a great idea. Well, again, we were on a single pipeline. We had just, it was a great idea. I can't guarantee that all three tiers of protection that we have couldn't somehow go out, even though we've got backup generators and everything else. I would suggest that you and your staff meet with our folks to see if there's a way to keep those online as a fourth tier backup. Water, too many people still, even with the Flint water crisis, take water for granted. Most people don't even know where their water comes from. I've actually had people call me from some of the townships that are on private wells when we switched over and said, my water's changed. What'd you do to my water? And we look it up, and they're on wells. So I can't guarantee anything. I, at this point in time, would say keep the wells. But I also would sit down with staff and see if there's a way to maybe share that experience going forward, or to categorically convince your people who should really give you the decision on whether you need to keep those operating or not.
Well, I'd like to thank you again,
My pleasure.
Mr. Wright,
Absolutely.
and our hats off. I know our board all is very impressed with the work that you've done. Our DPW, I know Jeff Sears, our director, has a great relationship with
Yes.
with you.
And that's a good thing, to have
Yes.
our people that work for us have those good
Right.
relationships, because they're the ones that make it or break it for all of us.
Right. And I know that Mr. Limita and I have talked, and we're working furiously and fast on future development, and I think we want to sit down with you and your staff to talk about how we can help expedite development when it comes here to Grand Blanc, and make sure that we have all our ducks in a row as well. So,
Appreciate the
thank you very
comments.
much, and congratulations.
I'm glad to be
Okay.
to be the first one for the presentation.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
congratulations
Thank you.
on the completion.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need that.
Let me just show shut it down before I give it back to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks.
Thanks for
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks as always, Jeff. Hey, I know.
Thank you, sir. Yes. Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you, Kevin, too, for being back.
Did you guys realize that the backup for Jefferson County water system was the Flint River?
Was what?
The Flint River?
With that, we are going to move on now to our citizen comments. Please come to the microphone, and you have 3 minutes. Please give us your name and address.
My name is A.C. Dumas, and I reside in Flint, excuse me, Flint, Michigan. And I'm just listening to the presentation by Mr. Wright. I just want to say this for the record. The city of Flint residents, which I have, I'm a lifelong resident, we have been the victim of an emergency manager that poisoned 100,000 residents. We've had 15 residents die of Legionnaire disease. And when we talk about the KWA versus GLEWA, they talk about the $7 million that had we went with the KWA, we would have to pay that back plus purchasing water. Our best option under Mayor Weaver and the Flint City Council was to go with GLEWA. And one of the reasons why that, you know, what Jeff said was incorrect, that GLEWA picks up the $7 million, not from the city of Flint, but they're picking up. I'm just, you know, I hear the presentations about that, but a lot of these outlying municipalities, they're doing well because of the suffering of the city of Flint, what we went through. And I don't mind saying what I'm saying because I am a resident of the city of Flint, and we're trying to do our best from a Republican governor who sent in emergency managers who are on trial now for manslaughter, and a host of other things, along with DEQ, people from up in Lansing. And I just thought I said that since he's out here, he should make that presentation in the city of Flint. He should go, you know, we have invited him, but he stays away from that. And then as I close, notwithstanding the sludge, the KWA deal was fraudulent. And we thought it was one thing, and of course we was under emergency managers and we had no power. Now we're getting our power back. So I just wanted to say that. Also, I'm the first vice president of the Flint branch of the NAACP. And we're having our Freedom Fund dinner. And I want to thank Joe Massey. I want to thank Ken Thomas for supporting the NAACP. And the NAACP was founded by 3 African Americans and 2 white Americans in 1906. So it's not just, it's the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization, but we fight injustice everywhere. And so I invite you for $100, Mr. Mansour, to support the NAACP, our Freedom Fund dinner, which will be March the 10th, right out here in Grand Blanc at the Genesis Grand Blanc Banquet Center. So I would love for this to say that the Grand Blanc Township bought a ticket, each of you. Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you, Mr. Dumas.
Oh, thank you for the new officers.
Oh, absolutely. Any other public comment? Mr. Hurd, good evening.
Good evening, Ed Hurd, 7212 Porter Road. Yeah, I just want to thank the board for looking at forward in this community, addressing our future growth, our potential, you know, and looking at our future. And I guess I'm going to say, don't get bogged down by a lot of hoopla and malarkey you hear out there. You're moving forward, you're doing the right things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ert. Okay. Moving on to our future positioning, and we appreciate everyone's time that they took to work on our subcommittees and what we're looking at long range. I think there's enough here. You might pass one more down that way. You got kind of a little bit of a summary. We had 11 priorities that our board had established a year ago, and we've been working on those. A couple of Saturdays ago, we met as a board for a workshop to look at what those priorities were again, and to come up with some vision statements for each of those areas. Mr. Mansour had suggested that, instead of 11, maybe we can boil those down to about 5 or 6 maybe at the most, so that they're a little bit more feasible in accomplishing. What you see here are some examples. For example, parks and recreation, affiliated facilities. Mr. Lima, do you want to comment on the structure of this document a little bit more?
Sure. What I attempted to do, and unfortunately, this document originated about 2 hours before tonight's meeting, so you'll notice that there's 8 strategic priorities on there, not 11, because I just couldn't type that fast. But what we'll try to do is we'll wrap it up in the morning and get it out to the board so that you guys all have this copy before you meet into your subcommittees. And what we'll attempt to do is, these are the strategic agenda items that you guys have chosen to impact. What you're seeing underneath each one will just, if you look at Parks, Recreation, affiliated facilities, during that Saturday meeting, you guys chose some visioning statements about what you'd like to see, and so we've captured those right from the sheets that were put together on that Saturday. And then the next time you guys meet, and the sheets were included in your packet after the vision, so that when the subcommittees meet, you can flesh out more of the current concerns and current opportunities that'll help you narrow these down. I think the strategy, and I put a few under each one that I put in here just to capture kind of what your subcommittees will be working towards, is a strategy is to help you achieve the visioning statements under each one of those. So that's what we would think that is the next time when we meet in a month for the 4th Tuesday and we go to give the update, we'd be happy to, if each individual subcommittee will just forward information on how they've narrowed the visioning statements that are underneath their particular agenda item, and then include the strategies, or they can fill this out themselves. You'll have it in a Word format and then round robin it around. But I think it helps articulate that vision, and it helps us to narrow it. So when you go through here, maybe if there's 8 or 9 visioning statements, maybe some can be combined, maybe some should be eliminated. But again, as you go through and look at the current concerns and current opportunities, I think it will help you, devise what the strategy is. Basically, strategy or tactics that you'll use. And again, like I said, develop and appoint a permanent events committee. I put that in there as an example from the events for every season, one of the vision statements that came out. I think if you work with each subcommittee, and I'd be happy to, either staff or myself will be happy to attend any of those subcommittee meetings to help you work through it too.
Thoughts, Mr. Mansour?
So a couple things. First, can we maybe harmonize this version with the version that Clerk Lane's put together? I know that she kind of sent out a draft not too long ago, and so maybe we can kind of get these together.
What draft was that?
Came from Megan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
Okay, Megan.
Yep.
And that is where these are coming from,
Okay.
is right off those sheets that Megan sent us.
It's funny because I see them, there was some things that were not the same as I've seen in other, but, all right, nonetheless, but we just want one record of that meeting. The second thing is, how are we going to narrow these down? If in fact we decide that that's the right thing to do, picking 4 or 5, whatever, how would we plan to do that?
I think, our subcommittees have 2 to 3 members on them. And I think what they'll need to do, if you agree with me, I mean, is that they would need to meet and look at, for example, let's say the Parks and Recreation. There's a laundry list of things that they would like to, or that we as a board said that we would like to accomplish, or that 10 years from now we would like to have in place. Doesn't mean we're gonna have in place next year, but 10 years from now, if we were to be dropped back into this community, would we want these things to exist? So I think what the Parks Recreation Subcommittee would come up with is a strategy for how do we get to that point, that if non-motorized trails throughout the township is really something we want to see develop, then our strategy needs to be to make sure that our plan has, you know, our master plan has those things in place. What are we working on for funding, and develop a strategy to get there. Does that sound reasonable, that we leave it, and then they bring it back to our board to say, that sounds like a reasonable strategy and a reasonable number of things that we'd like to see happen?
So let me just kind of follow on.
Sure.
So maybe I didn't make the point clear enough, but we decided there were like 11 different areas, and I think at the time we kind of concluded that that was too kind of big a job for us to take on. So I agree that within the ones that we select, the subcommittees owe it back to the group to pick the 5 things. But I'm trying to figure out how we get from 11 down to 5. Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Lane.
I think that one of the ones that at least the executive staff discussed today is the zip code committee. Our deadline for getting in letters is March 15th from both businesses and residents. And then it's going to be the process of pushing it through all the way as far as we can until we can accomplish our goal of getting Flint 48507 into 48439, as well as hopefully Holly for the southern end of the township. So that particular goal had already been started, was one we acknowledged, but it is now going to be into a set procedure to get it completed. So that's one that I can see we can drop off, give you an update, or let you know as it progresses with the Chamber's assistance. The second thing we talked about this afternoon was, we know, and we've discussed for hours, the value of our fire protection, and we're putting our millage question before our residents. So again, that would be the second thing. So we're down to 9 at this point, if the board is in agreement. And then I think the third thing we mentioned was the Perry House for grants was put under Parks and Recreation for that reason, so that it could qualify for grants. And that might be included with the Parks and Rec as part of that particular group, rather than as a separate item on its own. So then we're down to 8.
The other suggestion would be maybe, you know, we have business attractiveness assessment, and we have attracting restaurants and retail establishments. I don't know, those two may fit together. I don't know about Tech Village and planning and zoning going together, but they kind of fall a little bit together. I don't know, Mr. Lemata?
You know, I think that's true, and as you know, I'm trying to recap what came off the sheets that Megan sent out and that are included in the packet, and there's anything that we put on there on a sticky note on that work session, we're trying to include those statements in there. You're going to narrow the scope of those as you work with your subcommittees. Like I said, if there might be 8 or 10 of them there, maybe after you've reviewed them, you're down. You bring that down to like 4 visioning statements. Then your strategy is defined more. Then you'll be able to see that maybe those do fit together. Maybe Tech Village will fit in with the planning and zoning because it goes along with just plan for the community. It also, as you go through here, you may find some that you look at, you develop a strategy for, and you create, you know, what the strategy will be. And that strategy really lands on the administrative side of things. And so from a subcommittee's perspective, you're going to turn those over to administration and say, okay, here's what we're looking for. We want you to develop this. We would like to see, proactive policy or protocols on this. And then it's up to us to create those and bring them back to the board for adoption or for, moving it forward. So that would take some of those off as you go, because realistically, you're together for another 3 years or just less than 3 years before the election. And you want to get these things in place. You're going to choose the strategic agenda items that you can impact during your time in office or as a board, and at least get it moving in that direction. So I think it will naturally kind of shake out as you refine these. You don't want to like expand them and have 20 statements. You want to bring it down so that maybe there's 4 statements that you know that you reasonably can impact with your visioning statements. So I really think the process of moving through over your next meeting or 2 meetings through subcommittees, you'll probably eliminate some of this.
So, Supervisor Brett? So, I mean, I would agree with Clerk Lane on the zip code thing. I mean, I think that that's kind of past the necessity of this board to work on it. However, I don't see exactly the fire protection that same way. I mean, there's seemingly, especially with some of the email traffic recently, I think that that's still going to require some attention here, and it,
We have it on our agenda for our next board meeting.
That's right, and a future vision of what that looks like may be even more important now than it was before for us to work on and get it. So I would be in favor of that one kind of staying near the top of the list.
And some of these may have a priority in terms of which one, maybe it ends up being more than 5. I'm just thinking
Fine.
out loud here,
Yep.
but some of them may have a time frame that, they can sit on the back burner for
Yep,
right now
absolutely.
but yet we don't remove them.
Yep.
And that maybe a few months from now, we move them forward and work a little bit
Fine.
more closely on them. But there may be some things that due to timing and calendar, we need to work on.
For me, it's all about focusing, and so we can get, make
Right.
progress on some. So.
Yes. Mr. Kent?
Well, I wasn't at the strategy meeting,
Right.
and so it sounds like I'm kind of second guessing what went on in that meeting, but I agree. My first thought was, why do we even have 1 and 2 on here? Why do we have subcommittees for 1 and 2? 2, I guess, under the circumstances, as Mr. Mansour pointed out, I guess I backed off from that one. But why would we have a subcommittee for number 1? Wouldn't we just hand this list to our Parks and Rec Commission or our representative to our Parks and Rec and say, here's what we want you to answer for us, and they're the committee? I don't even get why we have a subcommittee and why we're taking our time and resources to do the Parks and Rec Commission's job. I really don't get that. And again, I wasn't there, so
Right.
I don't expect us to burn up a bunch of time here explaining to me why that should be there, but if you're trying to pare these down, that one just gets handed to them and give us some answers. Do your job,
Yeah.
kind of a thing. And 2 would be that way, in my opinion, if it weren't for
Right.
the points that Mr. Mansur
Okay.
brought up.
Yeah, that's, good observation, but just backing up to what our exercise was, basically what we did was we said that, if somebody pulled you out of this community, and you were gone for 10 years, and you were dropped back into the community 10 years later, what things would you like to see in place? And so that's kind of the visioning exercise we went through for each of these. What we didn't do is narrow them down to prioritize them or to say, maybe whose responsibility
Okay.
it would be.
Okay.
Part of, I think, what we have going on with Parks and Rec, and Mr. Thomas, I think, has touched on it the last meeting, is that they're looking at their organizational documents to figure out whether or not those need to be changed to bring up to date. I think we said the last time they were touched was in 1970. And so I think we're probably on hold with some of that Parks and Rec until
Yeah.
we see where that document goes. But we've asked the Parks and Rec Commission to come back with recommendations on what they would like to see in that organizational document. I can't guarantee that, everything, we own Bicentennial Park, in
Yes.
my own personal opinion, so some of these things would be on us to do, but again, it's also how we structure the future of our Parks and Recs Commission too, whether we say, hey, right now, any event that happens in the city, they keep the revenue for. Anything that happens and Bicentennial goes to the Parks Commission. So some of that has to be ironed out before we even go down some of these roads. So I think that one might, until we get an agreement on what our joint agreement should look like, maybe some of those may have to be on hold. Mr. Limita?
And I think that's a great point. So maybe what happens if you look at, under Parks Recreation, it was events for every season, was one of the things, in an active events committee with annual events for the committee were a couple of the visioning statements that were produced on that work session. So as you go to develop the strategy, the Parks subcommittee is Ken, Earl, and Al. They get together and they kind of walk through the visioning statements, they look at the strategy. They may come back with a strategy that's only a couple of things that say, we're going to give this list of things that we would like to see happen. Our recommendation is that we give this list of things we'd like to see happen to our Parks and Recreation Commission. And then the events committee, we think that the board can advertise and appoint an events committee, and we control that. So you may discover in your strategy that here's a list of things that are going to be controlled by Parks and Rec, and then that portion of it has been moved over to them, and then what would be kept for you, the board's purview, what would be under there. So, and then that comes off your subcommittee list most likely after that, and you're moving in another direction.
Thanks.
So some of these things, even though they're on our list, we may say, hey, you know what, this issue for the fire protection, we're handing that off to the fire commission. This other issue is going to be a township issue that we're going to deal with, whether it's rental inspections that we're going to take on, or, so very good point though, Mr. Kent.
I
Mr.
just
Mansell.
make one more comment. So, I mean, I think that we have good folks working in the Parks and Rec commissions and a lot of these commissions, but I think that they could be helped if we were to give them some guidance on some longer term things. That they're mired a lot in a lot of their day-to-day stuff and what's the next program and the next basketball or baseball, but kind of giving them some kind of future goals to work toward, I think is something we owe them, actually.
One of the things that we've talked about doing, and I need to put that schedule together, we Mr. Limita has had the different departments come and present to us, and we basically cycle through the entire gamut of departments here at the township. But one of the things that we need to do is to actually have the different commissions actually come before us. So for example, our representatives on the McFarland board, we need to have them, in the month of, let's say, April, present to us. The month of May, our appointees besides Mr. Thomas to the Parks Commission, and go through the list and do that on an annual basis, and each month have a different commission represented, present to us, but also where we can give them feedback that, we're talking about these items here, what would your thoughts be on that, and have a dialogue with them. So,
If we don't go through the exercise, we can't get the direction that we want to go through.
right, exactly. So we need to open, we found out that the library needed a lot of things because, he came to one of our meetings and, and that's how we found out. So we need to schedule that. So I'll get with Mr. Limita and we'll come up with a schedule for those commissions, and we'll start putting those in our board. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Supervisor, I happen to have an email from Mr. Foote,
Okay.
who is the president of the McFarland Library Board, and in your packets for next week, you're going to have their minutes. They meet 4 times a year, so you'll actually have the 4 meetings from last year and the 2 meetings from this year, so that at least before they even get here, you can see what they've been discussing at their meetings, and that might help you get started with them.
I'd say even send it out before then, so.
Well, it's in the
It'll get
packet,
jumbled
and the
up.
packet's
Okay.
going out this Friday.
Okay.
We're meeting next week,
Right, I know it.
so, short.
Okay. All right. So,
All right.
I think maybe what we do is we let Mr. Limita finish putting these together. I'm just wondering what our process is for combining some of these.
Oh, I was.
Mr. Massey?
Use number 1 as an example. I was looking at the events for every season, and I was thinking that would be on the sports consortium for attracting high school events. I'm just giving some examples. Active events committee and annual events for community. Those, I think, could be combined. But I go back to, excuse me, I go back to what Trustee Al's commented on, is that I was thinking about before we get to the fire thing, is taking it to my commission, let them review it before we combine anything, because it's very critical. I wouldn't feel comfortable, even with Parks and Recs, just on my own, saying this is what it should be. Let them take a look at it, and we come to some kind of agreement, and then that's among the subcommittees too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's a couple of things on the fire protection though that I'd want to maybe clarify before we send it over to the fire commission to look at. You know, one of them is inspection program, you know, for rentals. I'd want, that's going to be something that's township. That's not necessarily something for the city, I don't believe, but something that we would have to look at as a board. So I think, you know, when our task force meet, I think we want that information to come back to our board before it goes anywhere else, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
you're
and then,
right.
and then we, but I think we give our task force a chance to meet and go through this. Let's try and do that in the next, you know, meeting cycle here in the next month.
Yep.
And then, you know, pare these down, and then let's take direction from that. I agree with you, Mr. Massey, that we need to take those to the Fire Commission. We need to take them to the Parks Commission, but I think we need to hone them maybe a little bit, because we throw some of these things at the Parks and Rec or at the Fire Commission, they're gonna wonder, what are we talking about? You know, so.
Supervisor Bennett, I just
Yeah.
wanted to make a note here that in the fire protection, we are missing a key response or a key input from the last thing that Trustee Massey is going to use as his campaign slogan, which is eliminate fires.
Yes.
There you go.
So we have to make
Yeah.
sure, and we have to make sure and add that to the list.
Yes,
Eliminate
absolutely.
fires.
You still remember?
I like that.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do some more work on this, and I guess we'll meet as task forces and subcommittees and see if we can't combine them with our work. Okay. Anything else on that topic? Mr. Lehman, anything? Okay, moving right along. What are you hearing from the community?
No, Mr., we have an operational issue.
Oh, do we?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I would so move to approve the
Okay.
resolution removing the property taxes from Genesee County Land Bank owned properties.
Any discussion?
So I have a
Yes, Mr.
quick
Mansell.
question here. So this is a motion to approve a resolution, so
To
without,
adopt a resolution
Adopt-
would be the proper way to word it out.
okay,
Clean up the
so
language a little.
without Attorney Laddie being here, is this a roll call or is it a
Yes,
voice
it is.
vote?
A resolution, when it's there, is always a roll call.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lane?
Roll call ready, sir?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes,
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Myself, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did somebody make
Thanks.
a motion on that? I don't think.
Well, there was,
Kathy did.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Second.
And it was second.
I did.
Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
just for
Mr. Mansur,
clarification,
Massey.
has nothing to do with the vote. Mr. Superintendent, didn't we talk about this a few months ago?
What's that, with regard to the?
A. Didn't we talk about A a few months
We,
ago?
actually, what you did a few months ago, is we looked at some properties that were automatically gonna come back to us if
We
from
didn't
the
act?
county, if we didn't act, we have to specifically reject them so that they go to the land bank.
Right.
We have the first right of refusal, so it comes to us if we wanna keep those properties, if they have any public value to us. So this is different. These were new properties that have gone to the land bank, and as soon as they go to the land bank, this is basically a housekeeping portion for us to just waive the tax collection. We don't collect the taxes from the land bank.
Okay, good question. It's an ongoing process. Each year we have a couple more that come before us. Next item is what are we hearing from the community and future agenda items? Anybody have anything?
So
Mr. Mansur?
I mean, we might just want to take a couple minutes here. Many of us were at the Pollock Road meeting last week, was it? Or
Yes, last Thursday.
Last Thursday. And I thought we had a lot of participation from the community around there. And although there was a lot of, I think that there's probably a wide gap between what people are starting to come to the table with in terms of negotiating points and where we need to be. I think that everyone was pretty constructive around that. And I think over time we can probably find a way to kind of get the road repaired. But one of the things that one of the comments that really stuck with me through that was, did Pollock Road receive the same kind of attention in terms of keeping it up and not allowing it to deteriorate to the point at which it has to be completely redone as other roads? So that was something that I don't know how to figure that in, but when we talk about some of the things the township and working with the road commission, somehow we need to be able to make sure that we don't let our roads, get to this a horrible state of repair that now we're forced to have a big expenditure before it has to.
Unfortunately, the only roads that the road commission will maintain are the primary roads, and obviously Pollock Road falls between the cracks because it's not a primary road and it's not a subdivision, and nobody wants to claim ownership to it, so.
But
You're
roads
right.
like McCandlish and
Right.
Cook and others seem to be okay, and they're neither primary nor subdivision.
The county does maintain those, and they would say that they're a different classification, but I think you make the point that, you wonder how it got to this point, and if it was reclassified at some point to, I'm not sure how, I don't mean to be the apologist for the road commission, but you're right, how did it get to that? And how do we make sure our other roads don't get to that?
Exactly.
Mr. Thomas?
One of the things that I took from the Pollock Road meeting was when the employee from the road commissioner, the employee from the road commission was making mention that he kept on using the term that we are allocated $1 million a year for
the
road
county
projects. And it was just, we're not allocated it, the whole county
Is
is.
allocated $1 million.
And I found that kind of disheartening, the way that he was trying to, it seemed to me that it was kind of disingenuous in the way he was saying it.
Well, yeah, the county.
I called you the next day,
Yeah,
and you set me straight.
The county is allocated, $1 million, so I think our portion was about 60,000 this year, Mr. Limita. And so it isn't as though we're given cash. We actually applied that, towards whatever project that the road commission had scheduled. But the Pollock Road meeting was very well attended. Again, I think everybody wants to see something done. We'll see what Genesis or Ascension Health comes back with. We're preparing petitions. We did have an individual or two come to us saying that they want the petitions. So Mr. Laddie is drafting those, and we should have some language that we can share with the board if you're interested here in the next few days. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, can you have a written definition sent to us about primary roads?
Sure. Yes. In fact, I called a month or two ago and asked Mr. Daly for, and so verbally he explained it to me. And the problem with Pollock Road is that it doesn't take you from one
End of the
part of the
township
county
to the other.
And, but then there's a lot of other roads that fit that category too. So, you've got Embry Road that goes between Cook and Grand Blanc. So,
Right.
I don't know. We'll see. But we have residents that said they would be willing to, or they want to promote, getting it paved. We'll see. We have a number of other subdivisions in the township that are also interested in going with special assessments possibly, so we'll see where those go.
Supervisor Renner?
Yes.
Okay, so just to kind of finish off that comment, I think that you did a really nice job of moderating that, and it could have been a pretty ugly situation because of everything going on, so I appreciate the way you were able to navigate that and get all the people together.
I think you did an excellent job.
Thank you very much. Well,
So-
thanks.
So can I go with
Sure.
another from that. So, a few weeks ago, we had some bad snow and, and the- and I feel as though I have to raise this point because it's in my own backyard, so to speak. But we had some damage done to a number of mailboxes in the subdivision, and of course, a number of people that got a lot of air on top in terms of my neighborhood, or whatever my neighborhood is, and the rest of that. And I did get the email from Superintendent Limita about what the policy is. And so I'm glad that the township has a written policy on that so that we can explain that to residents. And again, this is the first time after living here for 11 years that I've seen that. So I don't know what was different, but it certainly impacted, 33 mailboxes in the neighborhood. There was kind of a pretty big number. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that the residents saw that, they had some questions, and I think we answered them. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manswer. Okay. I think Mr. Limita has a number of items he wants to bring up, unless anybody has anything else that... Yeah, Mr.
From the police committee, or police department, a reminder that March 6th is the deadline for the RSVP to the police award banquet on March 4th. 6 o'clock dinner and 7 o'clock.
Very good. Mr. Manswer, anything on planning and...
So, Metro Alliance was Valentine's Day, so they canceled it. And then I had previously reported about the Planning Commission, so I don't have anything further on that. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Thomas, anything on Parks and Rec?
Tomorrow afternoon at 6 o'clock will be the last, this will end the marking of the input from the commission on our 3-stage purpose, our contract, where we're all getting, everyone's been putting their input in. Tomorrow's the last day for them to finishing it. Next month, we're adopting at least a half hour workshop to work out the agreements that the commission would like to see to bring back to the board.
We're actually putting an agreement together?
Well, we're highlighting things that the commission would like to see in the 3 different.
Okay. All right, very good.
And
Excellent.
working on, and that should coincide with the procedures that you guys asked.
Excellent.
That you folks asked for.
Great work. You have a question, Mr. Manswer?
Nope.
Okay.
Jotting some notes, thanks.
Mr. Massey, anything on Fire Commission?
Nothing at this time. I think next week we will have a more in-depth conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything on Zoning Board of Appeals, Mr. Kent?
Board of Zoning Appeals had 2 issues this past a week ago, and both were postponed for a month.
Okay. Mr. Guzak, anything?
No.
Ms. Lane?
I had a request for Boland Drive to do a special assessment district, and I called the people back with the estimates that I got from DPW Sears, and they're gonna consider the figures and the prices that I gave them and let me know whether or not they think they can convince their neighbors.
Okay. One of the things that I'll just report briefly is that, Mr. Limita is working on a number of items that I think are fabulous. One of the things that, the snow plowing has brought out and the streets and roads with, the spring thaw is lots of issues. We've discussed them on social media at length, whether it's the flooding issues or the pothole issue. And, one of the things that we're using social media to do is to clear up some of the misconceptions, because part of the misconception is the township is responsible for everything, except for maybe national security. We're responsible for the roads, we're responsible for flooding.
Drains, yeah.
And so I think we're slowly educating people that the roads are the county road commission. The drains are divided up amongst, the DNR, the county drain commission, our township, and then you have individuals that have their own personal drain, or subdivisions that have drains that they've built that nobody knows about. And, but the first inclination is, you know, I pay X number of dollars in taxes, this should be taken care of regardless. We try to educate people that, you know, 17% of that tax dollar stays in the township. So somebody that, you know, pays $2,500 a year in taxes, probably somewhere around $400, I believe, would be about 17%, stays here. And for that, we provide police, fire, parks and rec, elections, we collect taxes, we run their local government all off that $400. The rest of that $2,500 goes off elsewhere. And I think we're going to create a few things that I think will help people understand that. Also to understand their taxable values are not back to where they were years ago, and that we're still operating at less revenue than what we did in the past. But I think we need to, I think we do a tremendous job here of providing services for the least amount of money of any governmental entity that services them. And we need to tell people and show people, you know, what we do for their dollars. Because we collect it, they believe all of it stays here, and we need to let people know where that money goes. That, Mr. Limita?
Several things. You guys all saw a copy of a email chain that was back and forth between the city manager of Grand Blanc and myself that I forwarded on. I forwarded you one also today, so if you haven't seen your email today, there's another one in there. They are making a request of the board to potentially share your thoughts with them on matters, holding a meeting for the two councils, or the council and the board, to hold a meeting, included township attorneys, the manager, myself, overseen by a moderator to discuss the millage ballot questions. Also, they suggested hiring an independent auditor to forecast revenues and expenditures as well as capital needs for the duration of the millage. So I'd like the board to review that email that went out, give it some thought, and we can certainly, if you're inclined to propose a response to that next week at the meeting. The attorney has drawn up the millage language for the fire millage request, and that will be before you at next week's meeting for approval. I've got information about the hiring in addition to the two officers which we just hired and that were sworn in. We have a DPW service technician to replace Mr. Boggs. Mr. Boggs took the promotion into the assistant DPW director slot. That left a vacant service technician's job. We have made a preliminary job offer to someone who's actually already an employee. He's been a part-time employee, has worked for us for the summers, and we actually kept him on as a part-time employee. So that job offer, his background check came back late this afternoon. If I'd had the information, I would have provided it to the board, but it came out late this afternoon that the background check has cleared, so I believe he has a March start date. I'll have that information for you at next week's meeting. The Pollock Road meeting, again, went very well. We have had some response back from them with people looking for the petitions. We told them that we'd have something together for them for March 1st, that they would be able to go and see the clerk and pick up. I do have copies printed out for everybody of a recommendation from David Laddie, and unfortunately he wasn't here this evening, a little bit under the weather with the flu. So I encouraged him to stay away since I sit next to him. But he did provide the language that he was suggesting for the petition for Pollock Road, and I'll make sure every one of you guys has a copy of this before you leave tonight. But I think this is a tougher one for us from a petition standpoint, because typically Clerk Lane crafts those petitions with Attorney Laddie, and we can give an estimate of what someone is going to owe. We have a better idea of what the special assessment district is, but this one just has a lot of moving parts with Genesis participation. Are they going to participate? If they're going to participate, what's the level that they'll participate? And then the size of the special assessment district. Is it going to include the subdivisions that we had encompassed in the maps? Is it not going to include both of those? So we're gonna have a more generic petition that says, we know that the cost after the county covers the engineering is about $850,000. We know that Genesis owns approximately 50% of the frontage and has agreed to participate in the costs, but is not able to give us the exact contribution amount. So we're really just trying to gauge what your interest is, and if more than 51% of the people are interested, we'll continue with the process. We'll pin down Genesis on the amount, factor what that looks like, because even then, it's not an equal spread. The farther you are away from having frontage on Pollock Road, the lower the value increase to your property, so that has to be factored into the spread of what you're going to pay. Probably one of the most difficult ones we've ever attempted to put together. And to get it done this year, if you want it done in the 2018 construction season, we pretty much have to be giving this thing a go in April, so that it's going to go to May for the road commission to approve and let the bids out and move. So it's a really a tight schedule. But we're trying to show, and I think the board, I would like to congratulate the board on just showing up and putting the meeting together and giving the folks a platform and an opportunity to know that we haven't been ignoring them. It's just that this is a difficult one for us to come up with some situations. I did make an appeal over the last 2 days to the road commission to ask for more funding, knowing that the state legislature has allocated that additional $175 million for street and road repairs throughout Michigan. Genesee County is looking at about $2.3 million coming in. I highlighted the fact what I've spent on snow plowing in the last calendar year, and appealed to them to at least reimburse us for the amount we snow plowed, put it towards the Pollock Road project. They are disinclined to acquiesce to our request, I'm afraid to tell you, but we'll keep on trying. And I understand they're trying to be fair, and they don't want to give something to one township that they don't give to anybody else. We didn't go into snow plowing with the idea that it was this for that kind of a relationship, but it is frustrating when we know. That leads me to the next piece of information I want to share with you. You guys are going to need to make a decision about amending the budget to allocate some additional funds for snow plowing if we are going to continue snow plowing for 2018, and here's why. This year we've had a little over 64 inches of snow for the total winter of 2017-2018 versus last year when we had the total winter of 38.1 inches. Not quite double, but a considerable amount. It also came at times where we ended up having to do some snow plowing that caused us to use double time during some holiday periods, just because of the way the snow fell, and it was the heaviest snowfalls during those times. My current cost right now for the total 2017-2018 winter is $93,325. We've budgeted $80,000 for snow plowing operations for the last 3 years. We used to budget about $150 when I first got here, but I went back for 5 years, and the highest amount we'd ever had was about between $80,000 and $100,000. So we took it down to 80 based upon the long-term average of where we were, and it's been more than enough. In fact, last year in November, I still had $64,000 of the $80,000 left. Unfortunately, that was before we spent almost $30,000 on snow removal efforts in December alone. So it really impacted our bottom line. We're sitting at $77,925 total, and then I add in mailbox repairs, Trustee Mansour, and as well as some miscellaneous materials, and then the salt that we purchase. We get 300 tons of salt from Genesee County for free, and then we purchase when we run out. Last winter, we didn't purchase any additional salt. This winter, we spent $8,475 and purchased an additional 150 tons of salt to keep the roads ice-free. It's kind of sobering. Most of the time we can keep it well under that 80,000 amount, but when we have a winter that is like the one that we're currently going through, it has a huge impact, and we are going to have to allocate some money. Even when I back out the 2017 and only look at the 2018 figures, I'm really bumping up against $51,000 spent. It's not gonna leave us a tremendous amount, and that's before the salt purchases, so really closer to 60,000. It leaves us $20,000 for the entire remainder of 2018 for snow plowing efforts. If we can stay in there, that's great, but that's gonna include next November and December as well. So I'm just kind of giving you the heads up. Right now, I do not have to amend the budget. I still have a little bit of room, but it is not a lot of room to move, and it will be amended at some point this year if you wish to continue snow plowing.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman.
One last thing, development ready. I briefly touched on it before, that it was something that Oakland County is working on, their One Stop Ready program. We've been working on ours. It's called Development Ready. It's designed to help advance investors when they come to see us, to show them more transparency and how to get through the system. We've had 2 meetings so far. Supervisor Bennett was able to attend this week. I think what you saw, Supervisor Bennett, was a lot of really good synergy amongst everybody coming together. We're going to meet in 2 weeks. Everyone's got assignments. We come back. The next meeting after that, we're going to do a mock exercise and actually walk through a development that we've already done in the township and talk about what went right, what went wrong, what could we do better, how do we remove barriers to get somebody through. We are going to invite representatives from the county so that we can see how can we make things smoother between our investors who come in and the county. So we're real excited about the project. We've got Robbie working on website redesign and how this is going to go on there, and I think that you will be very impressed. It is absolutely going to happen in 2018, and I think it's going to, when we look at your strategic agenda items, it's going to fit very nicely with several of those items, and it's going to go a long way to removing barriers to investment in our community. That's it.
You know, one of the things that, on the snow plowing, I had somebody that is looking at having their streets paved in their subdivision. He said, you know what, he said, I work in Lansing, but I got to tell you, he said, everybody I work with, he said, I tell them how great Grand Blanc is, you know, the township is to live. He said, in fact, I've got a friend that may move here from the Lansing area because I talk so highly of it. He said, you know, the snow plowing, he said, I know you guys don't have to do it, but he said, he said, actually, he said, you know what, I had a new baby, and he said, would you believe it, the police actually, you know, spent 20, 30 minutes showing us how to put the car seat in correctly. And he said, I was just so impressed that, you know, he said, I never lived in Grand Blanc till I got married, but he said, I am so impressed with the township here. But it's those things that, you know, we know that make Grand Blanc special. The snow plowing, you know, I don't know, we've got roads and streets as one of our items here, but, you know, one of the things we need to look at, on social media, I had somebody, and Mr. Thomas, I know, saw the discussion. He swears that we maintain the streets, that, you know, we're not being truthful and saying that it's not our job, because he knows that we plow the streets and that we've maintained them in the past. And I don't know if anybody has any record of us maintaining streets in the past, but bottom line is, I think one of the things I've spoken with Mr. Lemata is putting together kind of a position statement on Grand Blanc and roads, that they're not our responsibility. We don't fund them. We're simply act as the bank when it comes to getting loans or bonds to have them done. But just kind of clearly stating what our position is on streets and roads, and making it available on our website as well as a handout. And then as well, if people are interested in having their streets paved, it outlines the flow chart for doing that. But I think it would eliminate a lot of confusion that if we had that resource available.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
I would like to make a suggestion that we have Mr. Lehman put that together. That way we're all using one voice and one statement. Because the person that you're conversing with on Facebook, he said, well, you know, I've lived here for 50 years and I see your vehicles out there all the time fixing potholes and maintaining the streets. And I said, well, who did you hear this from? And he said, someone on your board. And I said, well, I don't think you're right. And we need to have the one coherent voice. So Mr. Chairman, if we could do that ASAP, that way we're all using the same voice.
Right. We'll work
Mr.
on that.
Mr. Supervisor.
Yes.
So, I mean, you know, you could make the assumption, looking from the outside, that if you see a truck plowing the roads, and if you see
Yes.
the occasional, what do you call that, where we just
Crack
kind of like.
sealing.
Crack sealing.
That's right. You, depending on what your definition of maintenance is, you could make the leap that we do that. So I think that the point is well taken, that we kind of scope out exactly what it means and what we do and what we
Don't
can't
do.
do, what don't.
Mhm. Maybe even the same thing for drains and sewers.
Yeah.
I think so. Do everything.
Yeah. Anything else, Mr. Lemon? Nope.
Chair,
Okay, yes.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Okay.
I mean,
All
support.
those in favor?
Okay. So, my phone's been blowing up. Ms. Fisher.